Hello, welcome to the channel. This will be the first and maybe a few of a lecture series on economics and the general fields of such and interesting topics that I have found to enjoy. I am basing this around Tanya of the Evil, which is a popular anime, manga, or light novel, and its main character, who is a rabid fan of rationalism and economic progress and productivity and efficiency. If you are new to the channel, then absolutely welcome. I have brought out what is the closest thing I have to Tweed, which is a very economic professor way of, I guess, presenting yourself as signal theory. That's a joke you might get later. My qualifications, if you might be curious, is I've read Man, Economy, and State by Murray Rothbard, and I think that's all you need to be qualified to speak authoritatively on economic questions. This is for my public speaking course, if anyone is curious. Alright, well, that's enough dilly-dallying. Shall we begin? Click on the tab. So what is economics? It's a pretty important question whenever you're actually trying to study something, is to understand what the word means. And so let's understand what the word means. Most people, when they hear the term economics, they think it's about money changing hands and the study of such an abstract idea of companies and blah, 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 blah. The economy is going great today and whatever politicians are talking about. Well, and yes, it is about that, but at the core, economics is a study of choices and human action. Why someone chooses to do one thing instead of doing a second thing. And these choices, these human rational ideas, are the foundations of a lot of those bigger picture money-changing hands or giant corporation actions. And the reason why people might make a certain choice in a certain situation is really the foundation of economics. And you can expand that to be rational decision making in a world of scarce resources. And let's talk about scarce resources. The way we can define that is pretty much everything around you is a scarce resource. Time, major factor. Everyone only has 24 hours. How do you spend your time? That's a very rational decision. Why would you do activity A over activity B? Why would you do activity C, etc., etc., etc.? You only have a certain amount of money. Why would you go and buy one thing whenever you could have bought a second thing? And as economists, our job is to study why people would make one choice over another and try to analyze that at its deepest possible avenue. And to really get the start and to help you understand economic thinking, we'll talk about this concept called opportunity costs. An opportunity cost is really what you lose by not doing something, by doing something instead. I'll give you an example. Yukari has a free Saturday. How would she choose to spend it? Very miraculous. She can either go to the movies, she can build model tanks, or she can stay at home and do nothing, have a lazy Saturday. Well, let's give an arbitrary value pretty much to these different actions. Let's say that she enjoys doing model tanks the most. She likes to go to the movies, and she likes to stay at home, but it's pretty much in that order. Model tanks, that's her favorite thing, and then the movies, and then doing nothing. Well, if that's the option, then we can obviously say that she's going to do model tanks because, well, that's the thing that she enjoys doing the most. And if we were to give it a specific value, not necessarily important, it's very arbitrary, she enjoys model tanks, she's doing that like 15 out of 20. She enjoys movies 10 out of 20 and staying at home like 5 out of 20. Whenever we give that specific integers of how much she might be willing to do something, they're not integers, they're fractions, then whenever you ask how much does an activity cost to do, then you don't just say the material cost of, well, she's going to build model tanks, so how much does it cost to build a model tank? Really, what you're asking is, yes, it's how much it costs to build a model tank, but how much are you losing by not going to the movies? So in reality, you're losing 10 by not going there, and you're going to build model tanks instead. The cost of any one action is equal to its actual cost plus the gain from not doing the next best action. We're not going to add staying at home because, well, that's not the next best thing she can do. She can go to the movies, which she values over staying at home. The cost of A is the opportunity cost of A is the cost of B plus the actual cost of A. So this is an example of rational acting, because if your goal is to maximize your utility or happiness, utility is another word for happiness, it's the economic word, in case you're curious, then you have to act in a rational manner to decide, well, I think that this is what I currently am valuing at the current highness. And that kind of brings us to something very, very important. It's the concept of value itself. Because once we have a decision, and once we say that a rational actor will decide to do something, they will decide to do something based on their values and how much they value something. So then, how do you decide how much you value something? And that's thanks to our good friend resource scarcity. Let's say we have two different people. You have person A, who is selling a truck online, and you have person B, who's going to buy that truck. Person A wants to sell it for $1,000, but person B is only really, at the current moment, willing to buy it for $900. Now they get talking, and they find out neither party is willing to let go at their standing points. They have not yet to meet in the middle. And once they slowly haggle their way to $950, then you end up with the actual value of that truck. And that's how value is created. It isn't just a person going on the Facebook marketplace and saying, I want $10,000 for this. No one's going to pay that, so it's not worth it. It isn't someone saying, oh, I'm willing to pay $10 for this. No one's going to sell them that for $10, so it's not worth $10. The only way that you can decide how much something is worth is whenever party A and party B close that gap and they decide that's how much something is worth. Obviously, party A, the sellers, there's a ton of them. In a general scenario, there's a bunch of people in the marketplace. They're all selling different items, but we can say that they're all selling this, like a truck. And truck buyers, there's so many of those, and you end up with this scattershot of 1,000 sellers and 1,000 buyers all meeting in the middle together to decide a market value of what exists would be that truck price. And that's what this graph right here is trying to analyze. It's this 1,000 sellers and 1,000 buyers all moving together to decide this, all independently and all through their own rational acting and their own values that they have created. Because you can see within the graph that the demand is completely flexible. At the very leftist point, you have what is maybe one person who would be willing to pay for something at at the very left of the graph, you would have a ton of people who are willing to buy a product at this incredibly low price. But no seller is willing to sell it for that low price. Well, maybe one is. And then you slowly move to the right, and you find out that as the price gets more and more and more, the demand's dropping off. People value that item less and less. But the sellers, they want to sell it more and more as the price climbs up. Obvious. And that middle point of once the graphs intersect is really that's the value point. That's the decision-making point of where the value exists within a society. And let's expand on that a little bit. Let's get something slightly more practical. We can go into the realm of applied economics. It's very fun. You don't normally get to do this on your first lecture, but hey, we're not very formal, so we can have a little fun here. Let's talk a little about game theory. It's not just a little MatPat thing that we can enjoy, but we can have a little problem matrix right here. So, you have two squads arrive at a hill. Two tank squads. Both squads have an option of fight or flight. Fight or retreat. How does each commander decide what action to take? This isn't, I value this burger over a taco, so I'm going to buy the taco. And instead, you have two parties that are both given the same option. Essentially, they're both the seller and buyer at the same time, and how would they react to each other in this certain scenario? You have a game, and this is the theory of said game, and we have it mapped out on this problem matrix right here. So let's take it initially from the viewpoint of the Germans in this situation. Well, let's go with their initial option, which is fight. So let's read. If the Germans were to fight and the Soviets were to fight, then this is the most complex, so stick with me. There is a 50% chance of victory in their fight. If they win, they get 10 value points. We'll go with $10. It's not, we'll stick with value points. That's much better. My apologies. If they win, they get 10. That's a 50% chance. If they lose 10. And then, so if you rough that out, it's really going to be about a value of 0 if it keep happening over a long enough period of time. Then, if the Germans were to fight and the Soviets were to retreat, then the Germans get 10. So in that situation, they can either get 0 across a long period of time, or they can get 10. So then we look at their next option, which is retreating. So if they were to retreat and the Soviets were to fight, they would get 0. We don't pay attention to the Soviets in this scenario. We only want to know the value we get out of our own personal decision. We don't care about them. We only care about us. Well, the Germans only care about the Germans. The Soviets only care about the Soviets. You understand abstract thinking. You're a rational person, after all. You've been taught. All right. And then, so, if both of them choose to retreat, well, the Germans would get 0. And so, we can look at this and we can say that the option of retreating either returns 0 or 0. So it returns 0. The option of fighting either returns a 50% chance for 10, a 50% chance for -10, so 0, or 10 confirmed. As for the Soviets, it's a complete symmetrical thing. So their fighting either gets 10 or -10, or 10, or 0 or 0. And so from this, without any other biases of how a commander might act, you would pretty much always get a fight-fight. And you can take these values, and then you can slightly maneuver them around of, well, this squadron is slightly better, so they have a 60% chance of winning. Or, this hill is more valuable, so in reality, it's worth 10. And losing it, it's only worth and losing it is going to be worth -10 because it's just losing out your squad. The retreating is going to end up the same. And you have all of these different little possibilities across so many different battles. And what would that actually look like? Well, it would look like the front line of any particular war. In this case, it's the Eastern Front. In case you're curious. Oh, no. That's my fault. I mouse on the wrong thing. Eastern Front. There you go. I found this map on Google. Keep messing up. And so you would have our first situation that we talked about over here at the top, and then cascading down the front line. Every single interaction between the squads, even individuals, is just this huge matrix of game theory. It's this matrix of one person making a decision and having the resulting situations happen out of that singular rational decision. And it's this method of rationality that allows you to analyze human action at a very complex rate. Because if you were to look at the Eastern Front and you were to just say, all right, well, how do you decide which side is winning, which side is losing, and how one squad might take on a certain hill? It's almost impossible. But the second you get down to the squad v squad level, where you have one interest and you have a second interest, and how they combine together to where you can find the way that one would react and one would react as well, then you end up with an entire front line or an economy. It's just a very different economy than what you might find in the newspapers. Well, you'll still find this in the newspaper. It's just called war. And that brings us to commands and free markets. whenever you have these individual situations and the decision makers themselves are the squadrons at the base level, you can define them as bottom-up thinking, or the individuals kind of leading the charge of decision making, choosing a action to take. And that is really representative of free market economies, which is the individuals within society are the ones making the economic choices of how many nuts and bolts to provide at a factory. Well, that's entirely dependent on how many they're willing to buy and how many the nuts and bolts manufacturers are willing to make. Versus what you would have a command economy, which is very top-down structure, which you would have, well, how many nuts and bolts is this factory going to buy? Well, it's how many that they are quoted, allotted to, and just randomly, not randomly, but decided upon by the Politburo and the party. And the actual market structure of this war is dictated by the decision makers, whether they are the squadrons being the ones to allow control and their free market war-making possibilities, or if it is a top-down structure that forces them to make their decisions even if it might go against their particular value matrix. This front line multiplied to every interaction decides the flow of the economy and its ever-increasing complexities. Because that's the most important thing you should take away from this, is the incredibly complex and interweaving value scenarios that every single person has within themselves every single day. But each decision they're making is very rational. It's decided upon their pre-existing biases and values, and it just happens to be what they decide to do. It's this incredibly complex system decided upon by really very simple ideas. And that's kind of the joy of the economy and economic thinking and rational thinking. It's taking these baseline one-off decisions and being able to scale them across huge functions and give general theories on human action and the possibilities of further study. I don't know if this is going to be the last of my lecture series. I honestly enjoyed making this, so I will probably make a second. If you have any particular topics you want me to touch on, if you want me to go more for game theory or give more of the basics, or you want to go on the dangerous zone of macroeconomics, then I will. But as per our first lecture, that's the conclusion. Thanks for joining me. The only homework you have is to, I don't know, tell me what anime characters I should put in the next one. That's a pretty good one. That's a good assignment.